Yeah. All right, it is 7:04, so let's get started. A little bit late, sorry about that. Let's start off with a call to order and roll call.
Chair Ian Petlars,
Present.
Member Brendan Betts,
Present.
Secretary David Tatus present, Township Trustee Angel Valentine,
Present.
and Township Fire Department Chief Ward is present. Roll is called, everybody's present.
All right, let's start with pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, moving on to approval of the previous board minutes. We have issues that they wanted to discuss.
There have been no suggestions or amendments to amendments. I present them as suggested, Mr. Chair.
Seconded.
Thank you.
Township update. All right, let's start with brief updates from Chief Ward.
My report's gonna be short and sweet. I apologize. We just got back from a cardiac arrest. I kind of got notes every place. Good note on that, by the way. We got dispatched. We were on scene within 3 minutes and we got the patient back. They just get into the hospital. So if nothing is a testament to getting a truck on the road quick, that is good. So just a quick update. Our run totals this year to date, last year we were at about 892. Today we were at 855. And we realized within the last couple of days, some of those numbers from last year are up a little bit in the year prior because we were including, as we had done in the past, we were including some extra PR detail, we were including things like that in our run load, and we've not been doing that this year. So that plays a little bit into it. It won't be a massive change, but that'll have to do an impact. So we are moving forward with our construction project upstairs. We've got a meeting with Q and company tomorrow to go over the plans that have been presented so far for the bunk room build out upstairs. So we'll be meeting with them tomorrow and just to kind of start working on finalizing the set of plans. So hopefully that should be able to get moving very, very soon, and construction should be completed by the end of the year before the. So along with that, there's a whole lot of stuff kind of going on. We've got a lot of things happening with our hiring process. We're in the middle of that process right now, which is actually going much better than expected. We of course, with everybody hiring right now, with what we're paying compared to everyone else, we expected our applications to be lower. We expected it to be less. Lafayette Fire, last time they had six or eight openings, and they only had 11 applicants, which is crazy. I mean, that's just not normal for them. But right now, we've had 2 that have been turned in now, and I talked today to 4 people who will be sitting there for the next few days, which is very, very good. And all those folks have got good experience other places. So, so it looks like we're going to have a good turnout for that. Andrew Spiker has gone down for his public safety physical. That got completed Monday. So Andrews will be taking the spot of field lead for his shift. So he's a part-time firefighter. And much beyond that, just again, a lot of things are moving with our ISO audits happening next month. We've had a whole lot of things that we've kind of been digging through that process, including our SOPs and SOPs. They're continually being updated. Been one of the things that we've talked about since we've come back. It's just a slow process. More navigating the administrative side of some of those things. The fireground operation sort of stuff is the easier things for our SOPs and SOPs, but they're moving along really, really well. So that is all I have for an update. Anything for me? Thank you.
Mr. Trustee, do you have any updates you want to give that are not related to later items?
Oh, of course.
Right. So. I just wanted to give an update really as to where we are, budget wise up to this point. We'll also print these off to you guys and get on here shortly. Apologize, I was trying to finish setting this up and finish those. So for the general fund, we have expended about 58% of the budget through 2/3 of the year, roughly speaking. So if this runs through August 30th, these numbers I'm giving you guys. Sorry, my bad. Yes, that is general fund. I apologize. And for, we have township assistance, just to give you guys an idea of where we are in administration of township assistance. We have, spent out through August about $13,595 that we provided folks in assistance. We've had some more since that point in August 30th. I know that over the last month, over the last 20 days or so, we've done an additional 3 or 4 assistance that we provided folks with. So when it comes to the firefighting fund, total expenses of it have been about 68% of the current budget. Quick reminder there, we're going to have to do by the end of the year the additional appropriation to cover for the perk buyback for the firefighters. And so we'll make sure to include that on there. We'll talk a little bit more about that when I present some of the documents later here as well. In addition to that, firefighting equipment debt, that's pretty simple. We've done one of the 2 payments on our 602 engine. So that is the easiest fund to tell you about. If it's past June 30th, we've done 1 payment. December 31st, we do the second. It's really tough. The 1190, the Cume Fire Fund, we've spent $93,500, roughly speaking. That would include at that point also the purchase of the Durango, the second battalion vehicle that we have that we choose that's going to be taking that. We'll have that one as well in there. And that's kind of what I have right now. Obviously, this last month has been really spent on finalizing the details of the budget. So that's been where my focus has been. We've also, continued to be in contact with other elected officials in the community. We're still working on some pieces that we might be able to do some good work going forward and working with community partners. We just met this week with Custom Plus Pharmacies as well. We have a range of interests that we're wanting to work with them. And so we're seeing what they would like to partner with us on. Among things that Custom Plus has helped us with when we have requests for medical assistance, they have been the pharmacy that we've gone to. And so Custom Plus Pharmacy was very gracious in meeting with us. And yeah, so we're going to keep doing that work. And Chief didn't mention the build out upstairs. We're in the process of starting to see some of the initial designs for that. And we'll be going to a preview class to see some of the presentations and the designs in the coming days. So that is all that I have right now for township update. Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I'm going to open this up for public comment. There is a public hearing on the budget coming up, so you will get an opportunity to talk about budget questions with us when that comes up. If there's any question the member of the public has outside of that, feel free to take some time now. Seeing none. Have no old business. All right, first order of new business. We have a speaker today. Dr. Scott Hambeck from TSC is here to talk to us about some of the plans for the funding. So
There's a PowerPoint on there. I already opened it up. You'll have to do the share so that it shows up on the. Oh, wait. Really, give me a second. It's not. Always technically. If you approve, you send it, we'll send that time, I can just put that in the minutes. Oh, okay, so that, yeah. You just have the people that aren't online and here. Yeah, thank you.
Eric, you want to smooth it over to this side so that
Put that on the telegraph.
the slides.
All right, thank you. Good to see you all. Thank you for the invitation here to talk about what's happening in the Tippecanoe School Corporation. There is quite a lot going on. So I will be as brief as possible tonight. What I plan to do is just, tell you a little bit about TSC's changing demographics. We'll talk mostly about the growth that we're experiencing and how we keep pace with that. And then we'll get right into what's happening in your backyard here with the big Klondike project. So, and if there's some time left in the end, we can certainly take some questions and talk about that. We're going to top 14,000 students this year. We are the 10th largest school district out of 300 in the state of Indiana. We've continued to grow. I've been the superintendent for 15 years. We've seen about a 35% growth in that time. It's just one year after another, we just continue to enroll larger and larger cohorts of students. And our kindergarten classes, when they come in, are some of our largest cohorts in history. And that's what ultimately drives your enrollment. As you graduate a particular size senior class and you bring in a kindergarten class, then you continue to see that enrollment growth. Where are they coming from? They're coming from all over. They're moving to the county. They're moving all over the place. We're a very unique school corporation. We've got this rural and this urban and suburban flavor a little bit. We cover 437 square miles, the second largest geographical district in the state. Second only to Benton School Corporation, which ironically, a portion of Shelby Township actually is Benton Community School Corporation. However, it's inside Tippecanoe County. That dates all the way back to the consolidation era in the late 50s. 11 elementary schools. Those are the colored school boundaries you see on the map there, feeding 6 middle schools, 2 high schools. We also service high school students at the Elston Education Center and at the brand new Greater Lafayette Career Academy, which is an amazing partnership. Let's look at this in a little more detail. There's our enrollment trend dating back to 2005, just shy of 12,000 students. And now we're going to be able to top 14,000 students this year. That's fine.
Minimize that so that you can see the graph.
And that's reflective of our 2021-22 count. Our official count for 22-23 just occurred last Friday, so we'll have official numbers for our school board at our next meeting. Our poverty rate, as measured by the number of students who qualify for free or reduced, that's a federal standard. In 2021-22, we were at 36%. So if you see our trend line, you can kind of see all the way dating back to the recession era there, 08, 09, and 10. We saw a significant increase. We were hovering around a quarter of our students at that level, but then the last 10 or 15 years, it's been in that mid 30%. Our graduation rates are some of the top in the state. We always outpace state averages, and our graduation rate is well over the 90 percentile. And so sometimes it's been as high as 94%, sometimes as high as 92%. Just to comment on this, the way Indiana counts that, if a student doesn't graduate with their cohort, they might finish a year later, they might finish a semester later. Those numbers aren't necessarily reflected in this count here. I want to keep moving here. Our ethnicity, the orange bar would be our students who identify as white. And what this graph representation is going to show you, we are becoming less white than what TSC has experienced over the decades. And actually our fastest growing population would be our Hispanic population, where we're nearly 16% Hispanic now. And that is not something that we had experienced as a school corporation. Even 15 years ago, we were around 8%. So we've almost doubled our Hispanic population in that time. Okay, so talking about all of this growth, how do we keep pace? And we work with the area plan. We're constantly doing long-term planning. We are always looking to acquire land. We're always trying to think 10, 20, and 30 years out. Sometimes we will close enrollment to non-residents. For example, Klondike Elementary, one of our fastest growing and one of our largest elementary schools, only resident students. So the students that are inside the Klondike boundary are eligible to enroll. And so sometimes we have to do that. We have to close enrollment to our schools to residents only.
We'll reconfigure internal building space. We will use every square inch of that building in order to accommodate students and their educational needs. We'll revise school boundaries. We did that here in the Klondike community back in 2013-14, and we shifted some students out of Klondike towards the Burnett Creek area. Of course, then, as you know, as this continued to really grow in this part of the county, Klondike has basically filled itself back up with resident students since those boundary changes. What else do? We'll utilize innovative academic programming. If you drive around our schools, we have portable classrooms. There's 3 of them in Klondike Elementary's parking lot. We still have some at Woodland Elementary. We still have some at Burnett Creek Elementary. They're not super appealing, but our teachers do a great job making those work. It's a stopgap measure. Sometimes we will build classroom additions, and sometimes we will construct new facilities. So it's really a multifaceted approach regarding how we are able to keep pace with the growth. This is just a small sample of the large projects. These are the major construction projects that we've had dating back all the way to 2008, when we opened the brand new Woodland Elementary School and the brand new Battleground Middle School. That was a replacement school from the town of Battleground when the middle school was there. Woodland was our 10th elementary at that time. McCutcheon and Harrison, significant construction projects in 2010. It was basically a 15 classroom addition out the back of both of those schools that added capacity. Then our 11th elementary came on in 2011. That was Wyandotte Elementary on the east side, which is an area of town that we need to continue to keep an eye on. That east side continues to grow. The McCarty Lane extension out in that area is what I'm referring to. And then you remember what happened in 2013? That was the tornado that came through Tippecanoe County and rendered Mintani and Southwestern inoperable for a period of time. And so we had to pivot and move those students to other locations to continue their education. And we took that opportunity to renovate those schools in a significant fashion, not only to get them back in an operations standpoint, but also to just upgrade them and provide some enhancements. Then also in 2013, we had an expansion project at Wyandotte Elementary. We reactivated Battleground Intermediate School. When the old middle school left, we turned that into a grade 3, 4, 5 school. And that took about $8 or $10 million worth of work to get that school reactivated. We added on at Woodland and Burnett Creek. We added on at East Tip. We added on at our Transportation Service Center. Battleground Middle School, and look, we just had opened it in 2008, and already 12 years later, we put a significant addition onto that school. Mentioned the Greater Lafayette Career Academy. We came back to both high schools and renovated the high school. We added a science wing at Harrison High School. We just finished that, and that allows us to basically capture about 22 additional classroom spaces for students. And we'll take the old science labs and we'll gut those and turn those into just general purpose classrooms. And then all the science has moved out into the new wings. Wainwright Middle School is getting a new cafeteria. Mayflower Mill, we're adding classrooms to Mayflower Mill right next to McCutcheon. And then we're currently underway with a new operations center near the central office campus. So that's just a smattering. There's projects on the books that are that are coming in addition to those. So this northwest quadrant, right where we're standing today, this is the boomtown. This is that high growth area. You can see this is basically Wabash Township and Tippecanoe Township, and that encompasses our Klondike School, our Burnett Creek Elementary, and even sliding on up to the Battleground Elementary. Over to the far right of the map, in the, I guess that's purple, would be the Hershey Elementary. So, but we're kind of really talking about this northwest quadrant of Tippecanoe County as being this fast growing area. And those of you that were around back in the 2000s, what happened near Veterans Memorial Parkway, that explosive growth and those subdivisions and businesses, that's what we sense is happening here today. You don't have to drive around very long to just have your eyes set on the new subdivisions and new businesses and all of the development. Very small slide, but the point of this slide is this is data that we receive from the Area Plan Commission. We meet with them regularly, and they provide us with,
subdivisions that are coming on board, the number of building permits that are coming on board, and they're able to take our TSC maps, our school maps, and overlay them on top of where the new subdivisions are coming in, so that we have an idea of where the new residential areas are going to be. And this is just an interesting statistic here. Since 2016, over 4,000 residential subdivision lots have been granted primary approval. So that's like a, kind of a one step in the process. Then I've got another slide here that shows you the number of building permits. So these are actual, humans building a home and moving into a home. And if you look back over time, all the way back to 2011, that is a number reflective of the building permits by year that are only in, it's somewhere in the Tippecanoe School Corporation. And so if you total all that up, you're nearly 5,000 building permits over the last 10 years alone in our school corporation. Not all of those home sites have school-age children. That number varies, but a significant portion of them do, and then we have to find space for them to educate. So let's get into the Klondike Project. Really, this project is twofold. Obviously, a very fast-growing area here, and so we have reached capacity. We have some aging facilities at both the elementary school. We have some portions of the elementary school that are still original to the 1954. And then we also are always looking at just the safe and the educational functionality of our schools. And so the Klondikes, were identified in one of our long-range feasibility plans in need of some improvements. So we're taking a very holistic look at this and trying to address several needs with this particular project that we're talking about. As you know, there's some rich history here in the Klondike community, dating all the way back to the high school that's on property. Those were the old school buses. And this is a picture of the Klondike High School from 1926 to 1970. That map is a very faded map, but it's reflective of the township school corporations prior to consolidation in 1962. Klondike was its own school corporation. That is a map from 1959, where they're reflective of 909 students, K-12, in the Klondike School Corporation in 1959. I love the history. I think it's fascinating. We could talk all day about that, but let me just keep looking here. So you can orient yourself to this map. This is the existing Klondike Elementary and Middle School property in aerial view. Klondike Road to your south, Highway 52, kind of to the left side of your map there. You can see that it's a very landlocked place. We just don't have much room to grow. Just to give you some perspective, you're looking at 28 acres inside that red boundary. The Battleground Middle School site, if you've ever driven past there, that property is 50 acres. And if you're a Southside person and you've ever been to the Weah Elementary and Weah Middle School, both on the same campus, that's 95 acres. And so when you look at the enrollment, Klondike Elementary of about 1,000 kids and the enrollment at the middle school of just over 500 kids, you're talking 1,500 students right here on this campus, K-8. The average size school district in Indiana is about 2,100 students. You have about the size of a school corporation worth of students in just your K-8 population on this property. So this caused us to think, okay, where can we expand? Do we want to stay on property? Do we want to look for land in other parts of the township? We explored both options. Ultimately, our school board determined that our best plan of action was to acquire property immediately to the south of the existing school. We have the infrastructure, we have the utilities. This community is rich with history. We didn't want to abandon the Klondike site. We felt like we could, with this land acquisition, add on to our functions and add on to our operations. So what you're looking at then is a boundary of the land that was purchased by the school corporation. In addition, the woods to the north would be kind of to the east of the football field. The school corporation ended up doing a secondary purchase for the 10 acres of those woods kind of in the backyard of that subdivision immediately to the north. And what that allowed us to do is give some flexibility in our planning and our designs. Let me show you what that looks like. So this is an architect's drawing of the property, and this is reflective of then the 40 acres that we acquired, the 10 acres that we acquired, and this gives you an aerial view of what the long-term project is going to look like. Let's start first at the middle school, because that's the project that's going on right now. That's the earth that you see moving. That will be a replacement school for the current Klondike Middle School. So our grades 6 through 8 will come over. It is built on a footprint that is very similar. Actually, it's the same footprint with some minor modifications as Battleground Middle School and Wee Ridge Middle School. We like that. It's very functional. We talk with those teachers and staff and principals of some changes that we could make, so we enhance that floor plan over time, and it's worked well for us. Got some parking. We've got access onto 231. That lane has become a road into the system, the county system, Nugget Lane. It's going to have a little roundabout area. That's just kind of a traffic flow situation that allows the traffic to come in off of either Klondike Road or 231, and then get to where they need to on the site once they're off the main roads. We'll be moving the football field. We'll be replacing some of the baseball fields that are used by Klondike Summer Rec. Then you'll see getting on up to the Klondike Road side, what's going to happen next at the current middle school, we're going to turn that building into an intermediate school. So the kids grades 3, 4, and 5 will come over and inherit that building. Then on the elementary, the current elementary site, that picture doesn't look very close to what you see today. So a very small portion of the existing structure will remain, but there are wings, there are additions, there are classrooms that are still, dates of 1954, renovations in 1972, renovations in 1989, even renovations as late as 2005. A lot of that will be leveled to be replaced by new square footage. So in total, what's going to happen, we'll have about the capacity for 700 students at the elementary school, and we'll call it the primary school because it'll be grades K1 and 2. And we'll have approximately 700 students capacity at the intermediate school for about a total of 1,500, maybe even 1,600 students, depending on optimal and functional capacity. So that's going to give Klondike time. It's going to give them room to grow. It's going to give us some elbow room. It's going to be very nice, educationally functional space for our students. The middle school is sort of what we call it a tweener model. It's not quite as big as the Battleground Middle School, but it's slightly larger than the Wee Middle School. And the way we're able to do that is with the pods or the wings. If you see 3 kind of extremities on the footprint there, those are self-contained at grade 6, a grade 7, a grade 8. So those students take all of their science, social studies, math, and English in that wing, and we're able to actually extend those wings or shorten those wings based on how much capacity we want at that school. I guess I could have zoomed in here a little better for you. So this is just zooming in on the Klondike Middle School. So again, 231 to the right side of your paper, some drainage types of things, then Nugget Lane going all the way through to Klondike Road, football field, parking, some baseball. So have a really nice flow there. Here's just a rendition. Again, what's very similar to what you would see at Battleground Middle School and Wee Ridge Middle School. This is a detailed slide of what those wings, I'm sorry, this is the entire floor plan. And then I think I zoom in on one of the wings here. So you get general purpose classrooms, you get a science lab, you get workspaces, restrooming, things of that nature. Here's what a new middle school costs. We had estimated about 65 million, and we thought we were estimating high, but with inflation, our bids have actually come in around $72 million. So even with a little bit of, what we thought would be a cushion when we put these plans together and put them out to the market, they've come back even over that 65 million. So what that's going to cause us to do, we don't want to shortchange the project. We might have to, delay some things, find some additional funding sources. We'll borrow against some of the premiums on our bond sales. There's some creative things that our financial office can do. But the last thing we want to do is shortchange the projects. And so that is not something we want to do. Here's a rendition. If we get into the elementary, I was referencing some of the dates of the wings of those schools. That blue section is the example that sticks out right away of Klondike Elementary. That's dating back all the way to 1955. There's the 1969 wings, the 74, 1960, and we've made them work. We've renovated, we've changed HVAC and all of those things. But there just comes a point in time where there's just not much else that you can do with those types of aging facilities. The current middle school is in pretty good shape. It works well. It will receive some interior improvements, but there's not a whole lot that we have to do at the middle school. Here's what a site plan could look like for the elementary and the existing middle school. Basically, what we're trying to do here is keep the buildings separate. There was some discussion about trying to join the buildings up, and for lots of different reasons, we determined it was best to keep them separate. The parking around back is new, and that's where we're going to have our bus traffic. It's a safety feature, trying to keep the car riders and the bus traffic away. We're even talking about, potentially some walk zones in this area. We could talk all night about our bus driver shortage and our transportation problems that we've been having, but we've got some solutions for that. And one of the long-term solutions could be increasing our walk zones, and Klondike is ripe for that, because of the neighborhoods nearby and the sidewalks that are nearby and are yet to come. And so this is what that elementary and middle school site will ultimately look like. So the main parking will be out front, and then you could, if you had a student at the primary school, you could go one way. If you have a student at the intermediate school, you could go the other way. Just an interior design of what the actual elementary school might look like. We're looking at kind of a two-story addition. The topography on that ground actually lends itself to that. There's actually a basement under Klondike Elementary. In case you didn't know that, there's an old gymnasium down there. There's some classrooms, so we're going to be able to use the topography that's already there and create a two-story building. It's cheaper to build up than it is out. Another rendition of the middle school, where we can possibly add a little wing, a little appendage to the ground floor, and that would allow us then to have increased capacity there as well. But again, not as many renovations are necessary. But again, we estimated this project to be another $65 million. So we're looking at 130 in total on both schools. We have not bid this project out yet, as it is still in its design phase. So that number is a number that we estimated that's probably 6 to 8 months old. So we're going to have to put pencil to paper, knowing how the bids came in for the middle school, and we'll have to take another look at this project. But again, we are going to keep our overall objectives in sight, just addressing our aging facilities and increasing our capacities. What's happening in the future? We've talked a little bit about the walk zones. That's something that we're going to look at over this coming year and a half, where it's feasible. We're a little unique in that we're really a county school corporation. We're not, urban like Lafayette, and they have like a 1 mile walk zone. But there might be some areas where we have neighborhoods close by to schools that it might be conducive, it might be feasible to walk. Then that would decrease our reliance on, the bus drivers, or we could use those bus drivers on other routes where we could shorten routes and make our transportation more efficient in other areas. We've got some central office operations projects ongoing. Our central office operations are under 4 different rooftops. It's okay. We manage it. That's just what we've been doing over the decades. But there again comes a point in time where the buildings that we're in now are just getting end of life, or they need repurposed, and so we're studying some what our feasibility looks like for combining some central office. We've got to keep our eyes on a new Northwest Elementary School, because even when we get this Klondike project done, Burnett Creek is full. We have portables in its front yard, in its backyard, that we're going to have to reactivate this next year.
The elementary in Battleground, both the primary and the intermediate are full. They might have one classroom available. And so we've got to keep our eye on this northwest quadrant of the county for a potential additional elementary school. Got to continue to keep an eye on the south. We talked about, Veterans Memorial. They're not done growing in the south. We're looking at plans along Concord Road across from the Veterans Memorial Walmart, townhomes and condos and duplexes and single family homes. And so there's just a lot happening. I get the question a lot about a third high school. That's something that we do keep our eye on. It's potentially a situation where we need to look east. We've got the north side covered with Harrison. We've got the south side covered with McCutcheon. And we probably need to keep our eye out east for property. We talked about our Mayflower renovation, and then one that I didn't mention earlier is we've got some renovations occurring at Mintani, because if they had space this last school year, we would have added 2 more sections worth of teachers. So there's just a lot going on in the school corporation. It's a good problem to have. I'd much rather be a growing school corporation than a declining enrollment school corporation. So let me stop here. There's other slides. We can get into other topics, but I think I've covered what I was asked to do tonight. So let me just pause and see if there's any questions, and we can talk about anything else.
So looking at your APC, the homes that have been applied for and everything else, do you see that trend continuing? Because what we see is just lot after lot after lot being built out here. And how are you going to respond to that once this is all built? What's your flexibility?
Yeah, so that's been the story of our life for 50 years. A school corporation will never get ahead of it, because it's the development that drives the schools. The school doesn't drive the development. And so again, that's where we just go back to our multifaceted approach. As the development comes, keeping an eye on capacity, keeping an eye on where we can renovate schools, where we can make additions to schools, and where we have to build new schools. I'll tell you, once we get Klondike built, we won't add on to that school again. There comes a point where a school is large enough, and what I mean by that is, if you have more kids than what 700, 800, 900 kids, your core functions would need to expand. You need a second gymnasium, you need a second kitchen, you need a second library. And so we get our schools built to a point where their capacity is large enough. Burnett Creek is that way. Battleground is that way. Woodland is that way. Elementary is that way. I mean, many of our schools, we've built them out. Mayflower will be that way. Mintani will be that way. So that removes one of our multi-pronged approaches, is just adding on, which then leads us to portables. It leads us to brand new schools. So yeah, we just really try and work closely with area plan, keep an eye on that. And there are way more subdivisions and home sites in the hopper than what's even reflected in these maps.
And you've only got limited physical space to add this, because the county stops just not too far up there.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
the decision, how do you make that decision then when you just physically don't have the space to build another school? What do you do with those residents that are building it? Where do you educate those kids?
Well, we have to find property to do so. I mean, that's what we've done. That's how Battleground Middle School came to be, purchased property. That's how Wyandotte came to be. That's how, Woodland came to be. So where those developments occur, then the schools need to be in that area as well, identifying
So
property.
purchase existing properties and maybe scrape it and then build a school.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, Doctor, I was curious, you of course alluded to the third high school. I hear a lot about that. I went to Klondike Elementary School and Middle School, and then Harrison for a number of years. So with the talk of the third high school, is that, and you kind of allude to it being in the east, optimally, when would you add that to your apparatus of infrastructure? Would you add it now, for example, if that land existed in a space that made sense and was reasonable?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so you in my opinion, what you want to do is get your current schools built out to where you feel comfortable with them, where they can, be large enough, but not too large. So there is not a hard and fast number on that. you know, when you look at Harrison, when you look at McCutcheon, you know, are they landlocked? Both of them are pretty landlocked, but we always are trying to identify land acquisition in the areas of those schools where you might be able to add on to those particular schools. So we don't have any immediate plans for that. We've got to keep an eye on our financial responsibility. Our debt capacity is only so much, but our board has been very, you know, frugal and intentional over the years of maintaining a nice steady tax rate. Basically, because we're growing, we always have a shovel-ready project, and what that allows is for a nice, steady and stable property tax rate. And ours is the lowest in the county of the 3 school corporations. 0.89, and so it's, you know, very, very modest, very reasonable, and very stable. So we can't get ahead of ourselves on that because we just don't have the debt capacity to do so.
So I definitely hear you on those real world limiting factors. We certainly run into that as well. I think most units of government, especially the smaller ones, you guys are fortunate to be able to tap into a little bit more. So then optimally with the growth we see, if it continues that upward trajectory, are we talking 5-10 years? To go back to kind of the thought of the timeline on that 3rd high school. If all other things are kind of held separate, what do you say?
You're doing well trying to pin me down on an answer that many have asked, and I'll continue to evade, but it's not 5 years. It's not 5 years. We have too many projects in the hopper. Think of it this way. You just saw how these bids came in for a middle school. Think about a comprehensive high school. 3 times the size, probably 3 times the cost. There was a time where I would be able to tell you that a new high school might cost $120 million.
Right.
I don't think I can say that in today's environment. I don't even know what to say. 200 million, it would just be a stab in the air. And so even if we talk about that, you've got to think about staffing. And so, you know, can we find 3 physics teachers? You know, we have a hard enough time finding physics teachers, finding special ed teachers, finding teachers in general. So could we build a building? Sure, but then we've got to staff it, and the staffing, that's you know, 82% of our budget. And so, you know, we're going to have to maintain it once you build it. So it's a far down the road number if you're trying to pin me down on when the 3rd high school.
So, obviously, we've seen a lot of growth around the 231 corridor, including closer to Purdue, actually, which is part of your guys' territory. And we expect, at least from our perspective, that a lot of those folks will also be, you know, professors and people with kids and all that stuff that will be going to your school system. Are you guys tackling that? Like, how are you guys tackling the 231 corridor growth? That's a big challenge, I know. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the most significant response is the new middle school on property on 231. That's what made this location attractive, in addition to not wanting to abandon, you know, the Klondike, you know, culture and the history we have here right on this property. And so, yeah, the Discovery Park is the new home sites in the old married student housing. That's actually TSC. Not everybody knows that. Not everybody realizes that. And so there are students coming out of there, not as many right now as in its, you know, in its heyday. But you know, definitely those, if there are students in there, we will bus them, and we will pick them up, and we will educate them.
Especially with I believe that I always forget the name of them, if it's Providence, but those houses addition that are coming in, and that's another 50, 70, 80 houses
Yes.
that have already been, like, you know, planned for and built. So
Yes.
that's a big challenge that you guys have on your hands too. So.
On that note, I think I heard you mention the primary school at about 700, the intermediate at about 700. What was the capacity for that middle school that you're looking at student-wise?
Our new middle school,
Correct.
it will be upwards of 800. Yeah. So the fortunate thing with the current boundary arrangements, only the Klondike 5th grade feeds Klondike Middle School, whereas in our other situations, there are 2 elementary feeder schools that come into 1 high school. Klondike Elementary is our largest, so whatever their 5th grade class is, you know, that averages anywhere from 130 to 160 students. That times that by 3 for your 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and so we're usually hovering around that 550. Maybe they'll get to 600 soon, but we wanted to make sure we built that
because we don't want to have to come back and renovate that, within 10 years. We just experienced that at the Battleground Middle School. So our school board said, hey, why don't we think about going a little bigger than maybe what we need today, in hopes of just, delaying a future renovation based on the growth that's happening here in the northwest side. I see a hand flash over here. No? Okay. I thought I saw something. Pardon?
I'll take it easy. I'll see the board meeting though.
Oh, yeah, no, you're welcome to ask any questions. Happy to take any others too.
You had made a comment when you were talking about the building permits, the number of building permits, and you said, of course, some of those would not necessarily have school-age children in them. But I think something that's important to remember with building permits is if you have an apartment complex that goes up, that is a building permit. A building permit that's got multiple residences within it. And we've seen a lot with the calls we've been going to more in some of our existing apartment complexes, more families living within them and not just college students like we've historically seen. So, I mean, you're right that number doesn't necessarily reflect school-age children, but there's also a number that's not seen there that does reflect that you're not able to necessarily quantify right away. So.
Right. Yeah, and I think I had a slide on that here. Yeah, it's too small even with my glasses.
Sorry, I didn't mean.
No, that's fine. It's a great question. Yeah, so this number, this is single family. So these are homes. And so then you get into a whole nother conversation about the subdivisions, primary approval, secondary approval, plan development, where you start talking about your apartment complexes. That's where, I mean, we're into the numbers of, the thousands when it comes to, how many family units could be in a particular area, particular subdivision. So, yeah, this is just a snippet of the data that we dissect.
Do you get estimates on that from them as well? In addition to this, they're giving you lots, right? But are they
Yes.
giving you estimates of family units
Yes.
that are
yes.
going in there?
Yeah, we just met with them within the last 2 months, and they update our reports every year. And so I've got a report from them that's probably 45 pages long talking about this.
And do you find that is the percentage of those that end up having school-age children changing in any significant way over the past 10 years or so?
That's a good question. I don't know if I have an answer for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
My curiosity is, as we grow more, do we expect that to change in any significant way? Because if that number goes up faster than it typically has,
Mhm.
and you're already bumping up at capacity in several schools, we're talking property on property on property, like you guys are building out properties on top of all these homes on top, and we're covering all of it with fire protection.
Yeah,
It's just something to keep in the back of our
There's
mind
so
as we
many
think about
factors,
growth.
right? I mean, how old are people these days getting married? How many kids are they having these days in this economy? I mean, there's just how many new residents are moving to town? What's the job market like? And that attracts a certain demographic of adults, whether they might be later in their career and their kids are grown, or are they jobs that bring them in where they have, they're maybe younger and they've got younger age kids. So there's just so many factors to know, but I don't know that we even really look at it as much that way as where the development is happening. Those students will knock on our doors and ask to be educated, and we have to do our best and adjust and ebb and flow with that. And so that's what, that whole list of major projects we've had over the years is our attempt at keeping pace. We will never get ahead of the game. It's impossible.
So you usually when you've hit capacity at one of these schools, which is starting to happen now, how long, so you realize you have a problem, and then you have to start, you basically can't start thinking about the next step until you already have a problem. Is that?
Not
Or do you
necessarily.
kind of know when it's coming?
Yeah, so let me give you an example, like this Klondike project. A project was identified 10 years ago through our demographic and feasibility study. And so, the actual scope isn't fully defined at that time. 5 years ago is when we began making decisions to say, this is where we want to be. We don't want to vacate this property. We need to begin to identify the scope of the work. That includes the land acquisition. That includes the size of the school. That includes just the scope of the work if it's just going to be renovations. So 5 years ago, actually, probably 6 now, 6 years ago is when like pencil hit the paper and approvals and checkpoints with the school board were actually occurring. And you can see, I mean, 6 years and we're just now moving further.
Okay, so you're usually doing some sort of straight line projection on when you're gonna run out of space and just trying to keep up?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
That's why I list, what these
Several
futures
of these
are.
next
Yeah,
ones.
exactly. We're going to need another Northwest Elementary School at some point. We are going to need another South Side Elementary School. And so,
And so is this stuff that you guys are in those early stages now on? Like you just talked about
Yes.
Klondike being 10 and 5 years prior, you're
Yes.
doing big steps, so you're doing some of those now with these.
yes, very much so.
So we should expect in the next 10 to 15 years to have those two schools. Probably. You don't need. the-
Probably,
You don't need the-
likely.
I'm not trying to be
Maybe.
exact here.
Yeah,
I'm just
right.
trying to get an idea. That's a lot of property.
Hypothetically speaking, what day will it be done?
There's a lot of property that then has to be protected. And
Right.
we gotta worry about.
Right, let's look at this. So we talked about Mintani in your lower left there, we're adding on. And they're gonna get to be as big as they can be. Mayflower just to their north, they're gonna be as big as they can be. Wheel Ridge Elementary, they are a landlocked, pretty much built out school boundary. We could add some classrooms there. We don't have plans today to do that, but we could. Woodland Elementary is as big as it's ever going to be. Cole Elementary is as big as it's ever going to be. Dayton Elementary is one that we might need to expand soon. They've got new subdivision out there. It's a very old school. It's a very odd configuration school. It's going to need some improvements. Wyandotte, we could add on to Wyandotte, but our stopgap measure currently are the portable classrooms we have out there. Hershey Elementary, it's as big as it's ever going to be. That's actually one of our schools where we have capacity. So yay. Battleground is as big as it's ever going to be. Burnett Creek is as big as it's ever going to be, and we just talked about this Klondike project. So as the growth comes, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it may be, those are the schools that we have some options to expand. But after that, that's where we've got to be looking at land acquisition for a future school site. Where is the proper location? And that's the question of the day. There's just no, we're always looking. Middle schools, we're in good shape. We're in good shape. They're typically larger already. And, we're able to put more students in there. Harrison, we're going to be okay. We probably bought ourselves 10 years. I mean, just depends on the development, the speed of the development. McCutcheon is pretty well landlocked. There's not much more we can do there, but they're not growing at the fast clip as Harrison is right now.
It would still.
Build up, it's
Yeah.
cheaper to build up than out. We actually talked about that. Yep, there's a lot of structural issues with that. I'm not an engineer, but yeah.
It would seem that growth begets growth, because people are attracted to growth and those services that it provides. And then at some point, density fills that, and it's almost a detraction of growth. And at some point in time, we're going to be at a density level where you just can't add another school. It seems like that may be 20 years down the road.
Yeah, there's 437 square miles there. And, we were talking earlier about the area plans, long term, like 30, 40-year plans. And as they look at that northwest corridor going up towards the interstate and, extensions of, 43 and 231 and, just kind of like they're looking out east, underneath the interstate out 26. I mean, those 30, 40-year projections, yeah, there will be development there someday. And so I think all of us
need to continue to keep our eye on what services are gonna be needed for the people that.
Especially
develop
once
that
they
property.
take 65 up and move 65 up, which they're gonna do.
231.
Yeah, 231 up
Yeah.
to.
They're gonna join.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna go. Yeah, Dr. Hancock, I get it.
I might have missed it. I'm gonna zoom back in on our project, it's local here. The projects that at the middle school and the elementary, or I'm sorry, the current middle school and the elementary, are those all wrapped up in part of the same project, or are those going to be spread out over the next 5 years? Good question. They will be spread out over 5 years. Okay. Yes. So the plans for the middle school, we hope to be open within 18 months. So, it's a 24-month total bill. So I think that puts us in the 25, 26 school year. My math could be off standing here. But then the elementary school, once we start bidding that project, it's a very complicated project because where do you put the kids during construction? We can't just do this over spring break or summer break. And so part of our thought is, once we get the new middle school constructed, it's gonna have a little wiggle room. It's gonna have some space. We might need to move our fifth graders over there. We might need to move our kindergartners over there. We might need to move multiple grade levels over there to get kids out of the way of the construction at the existing middle and at the existing elementary. And what that means is just very detailed and very complicated construction timing schedules. And that elongates the project. In a perfect world, would love to, vacate everybody, do the project. There was enough labor, enough material to get the project done in a short amount of time, but we're not in a perfect world situation. I think this is super helpful to me because that was a big part of the question that we had was we love the idea of the middle school and what it's going to look like, but what's going to happen beyond that point? And this is super helpful because the appearance was simply just that there's still going to be too many kids for the other two schools. So now what? So yeah, this is a huge benefit to help them see the long-term. Yes.
I have one last question. It's a little loaded. I think I know the answer. What are the odds that the state legislature decides to at some point move the boundaries of the school district? I know West Lafayette isn't capped out when it comes to their number of seats. You guys are close to capped out. What's the chance that that happens instead of you guys being left to deal with the growth alone?
0%.
That's what I thought.
Because that is a local taxpayer.
Yeah.
decision. That is a school board decision. And we actually got that question when Mayor Dennis annexed West Lafayette City. We had TSC residents contacting us saying, does this change the school boundary? A lot of them presumed that it did. It does not. And they were thankful for that. And I always like to remind, the mayor, there's 2,500 students in West Lafayette School Corporation. The part that he annexed into the city, the part that is TSC, there are 575 TSC students inside that boundary. So another way to say that is 575 parents vote for you, mayor, or not, right? And so when you look at that percentage wise, out of the 2,500 West Lafayette School Corporation, that's a big number if you want to call that a big number, but 575, almost 1 in 5 are actually in TSC. And so just gives you a little bit of a perspective on as the mayor's annex, and Mayor Tony did the same thing on the south side. School boundaries don't change with the municipal additions.
I knew the answer to that. I just wanted to make sure that it was so that folks, in case anyone had a question about that, so I didn't know the answer.
Any other questions?
All right. Yeah. Hey, thank you all. Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot going on. And
Can we get if you send that to me, I'll just put those slides in our minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you can send that to me, I can get you my email so that you can.
okay.
Or download it to the computer. We'll download it.
Yeah. Why don't you just have that there? Yeah.
Thank you.
And by the way,
Yeah, I probably won't stay for your budget hearing, is that okay?
I won't be offended. I don't-
We aren't either. We had our own last week, so
Thank you. Thanks for taking the time.
you bet, my friend. How big's your budget? What's your total?
I've been spending all day looking at the figures and right now I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly off the top of my head. It's like 2 point something.
Yes.
What's yours? Ask you for a friend.
Right.
All funds about 155.
I mean, that may have to do with the audio. I'll check the audio.
Okay, all right. Thanks again. Good to see you. Yeah. We are, yeah, I've been in contact with Brian. We're good. Yeah, okay, yeah. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So you asked him if you could put your sign on the.
That is not what I asked. him.
Okay.
Thanks, fine. Yeah, sorry, all right. Very good.
Thank you.
Okay, it is that time. Everybody ready over there?
Yep.
So we're going to convene a public hearing on the 2023 township budget. I believe we have some materials here. Is there anything you'd like to pull up on?
It's already up. I can do it. Well, you have to convene and call it to order.
Yes, so, motion to call to order a public hearing on the 2023 budget.
Member Betts, how do you vote?
I will definitely vote in favor.
Aye.
Okay. What would you like me to pull up here?
It's a PowerPoint and an incognito tab because it's mine.
Every single person having a superintendent. Man, he's got, I'm standing on the same, gasoline cost, equipment cost. Yeah, I believe it. He's my largest operations manager for airline.
Alright.
Just the small. Small.
All right, so I'll just, before I start here, so obviously this would be the hearing, so I'll give a presentation hearing on all of the details. Obviously, we've covered a lot of this over the last few meetings, so almost none of this will be a surprise to you guys. I gave you, in the packets, I know I had already sent them via email.
Yes.
These are the Form 1, which is the budget estimate. Form 2, which is estimate of miscellaneous revenue, and then the Form 4Bs for all of the different funds in the township. Quick note, and I know I added it on the website as well. The adopted column is a placeholder. It does not mean that we've adopted it. It's just a placeholder. You guys adopted it. I don't get to adopt it by myself. All right, and so we can go through here. And let's get started. So let's start with the firefighting fund. So we'll do the more complicated part of the night first, actually. So you guys have already seen some of this, but the budget for the firefighting fund is divided into a couple of categories. First one is personnel, which includes the firefighter salaries, the employee benefits, FICA, the employer share. It also includes supply, medical and operating supplies, services and charges, which is, everything from volunteer recruitment and retention, allowances, training, repairs and maintenance, And a quick note on that last one, as I mentioned, it got shifted from,
Yes.
it was in a different position in the budget, and it just didn't make sense for my predecessor to have placed it. So personnel services, as you all know, is the most expensive part of the firefighting fund. And this proposed budget would take us from 1 firefighter per shift to 3 firefighters per shift. It's also includes a 4% increase in pay for firefighters from 2022 to 2023. We also changed the pay structure, and it is now defined by rank rather than just 3 random numbers thrown together onto the budget. And then we have also established longevity pay. That's a piece also to 1977 for that fund. And as I mentioned last time, the township administrator will 15 of the 40 hours of them. So, that much will be paid out of the firefighting fund. The rest of it will be paid from general fund. So personnel pay scale, this is for firefighting personnel. Chief, you've already seen this. We have essentially defined all of the pay grades as a percentage of the pay of the firefighter first class. A firefighter first class, for example, right now would be Travis Merkel. The other positions right now that we do have are captain. We have a deputy chief. We don't have a battalion chief, but we have it in there in case that at some point, for example, if Deputy Chief Wade moved on to another department, and instead of hiring deputy chief, we hired a battalion chief. That would be their pay scale as we will move forward with that. And so the rest of it is just pretty self-explanatory. That hasn't changed since the last time you guys saw it. So. Yeah. Longevity pay. Longevity pay, we have the years of service, and then the amount is set. It's set as a percentage of the firefighters first class pay. Quick note that for future years, it won't automatically increase. We can keep it at the same amount for a couple of years. However, for PERF 1977 fund reasons, we can't decrease it going forward. But we've done a smaller amount than other departments, including West Lafayette. Although we did make it a slightly bigger percentage of their firefighters first class pay because our salaries are a little lower. But it wouldn't automatically change if we had a significant increase in pay under future administration. And then this is the personnel services line items. This is the same that's on there, just a little bit easier to visualize. And I will actually, I apologize. I believe that in one of the future slides, I did forget to change the subcategories to reflect what was uploaded onto Gateway, but everything else will be correct. And it's what you guys have. So this is the budget as for this particular portion of the firefighting fund. Health insurance has been prorated, if we assume an increase of about 3% for upcoming year. Per 1977 fund, you'll see an increase that is related to our increase in staffing levels. You'll see a decrease in FICA. That is because as we migrated to the 1977 fund, we stopped paying FICA for the firefighters. So that FICA employer piece only accounts for part-time staff, and then the township administrators, so fire, component from the firefighting fund. One change here that would from the last presentation, Mr. Pitlow had reached out to the trustee to ask specifically about paid family leave and for paid leave. And so we have included that number with part-time staff because the effect of it would be that in that time frame when we do not have the employer in the building, you might need to have a part-time staff that can be added that into their part-time staff category. So that is accounted for in the budget here. Unemployment, it's just prorated. And then modified for work comp, we didn't have that line item in last year's budget. We paid it together with all of the other insurances and it wasn't broken out per category. So we added that onto there as well. Y9 firefighters, the chief board can talk a little bit more about this in detail then if you have questions. So obviously our service area has become much more suburban over the past, 10, 15, 20 years. No surprise there. The conservative estimate for the growth from 2011 to 2020 was that we grew about 22%. And that is most likely an undercount, given that the 2020 census did not reflect accurately the number of student population. And so, a lot of university towns were impacted in their counts in that area. What we're seeing here is 3 firefighters per shift. As we've discussed in the past, NFPA 1710, which I believe Chief Board has a handout for as well. It states that 4 firefighters are needed to roll out with an engine. And a quick note that in the NFPA standards, this is referred to as an engine company. During the daytime, Deputy Fire Chief, who right now, Joe Wade, would be the 4th firefighter on the truck, or could be if we don't have a volunteer present or a resident present at that time. During evenings and nights, generally speaking, the station residents and volunteers are more available. Obviously, the station resident depends on the role. Right now, we have a station resident, and he is a pilot. So some days he is here throughout the entirety of the day. Other days he's not here at all. And that's just the nature of his job schedule. 4 firefighters at the stations allows us to have a quicker response time, obviously. That is hugely beneficial. We have instances, right, where we are sitting here, we might have to wait for a volunteer to show up so that we can roll out a truck. And even then, that doesn't necessarily guarantee that we'll be able to begin operating on scene, because we might not have enough staff at the scene yet. And it's just the nature of the volunteer department. Some days we might get 12, 15, 20 folks to show up at the site of this at a scene of a fire. And in a similar scene, we might just only get 2, right? So 2 volunteers. So, and it's just part of the nature of the volunteer department. We want to make sure that we can begin operating and not let our clients, taxpayers or residents, down by failing to be able to respond. I don't think anybody who's been here the last few years know this. The growth is long overdue for our run volume. And as we've mentioned in the past, we're operating with significantly less funding than comparable sized departments. Moving on to supplies here. Medical supplies. We left it at the same amount. So we had $9,000 last year. We're keeping it at $9,000 in the 2023 budget. Obviously, we'll make sure to monitor that and make sure that it is sufficient for future budgets as well. We'll probably at some point for the 2024 budget, most likely we'll need to do an increase because, things increase in taxes. Operating supplies, we modified this line item. We moved more money into it. There were a couple of changes which you guys have seen in the last presentation, especially the other supplies was a very mixed bag of what was there. And so we changed those line items. So in fact, I don't even think that last year's line items really properly represent, or the ones that we're operating under right now. The amounts that they were set at by the previous trustee do not accurately represent where they should have been. So point at the end of it all being $9,000 for medical, $20,000 for operating supplies, and then $5,000 for other supplies. Services and charges, we have professional services, we have expenses related to volunteers, so not explicitly just volunteers, training, recruitment and retention allowances. And then we have repair and maintenance, which is a category that we moved onto this fund because it makes much more sense from an accounting perspective and from what the purchases are and the expenses are. And then the last piece of it are the fire department insurance policies that cover the buildings and the apparatuses. And some of the extra insurance pieces from the department. So, for example, if something were to break on a scene, that's not work comp or anything like that, but it covers property for the firefighters as well. Services and charges, we left the amount for professional services at the same amount, 12.5. We're at about pace. I did a quick calculation on this one. This year we are exceeding that amount for a variety of reasons. For example, Dr. Sanson, who is our medical director, is that right? The medical director for the department was not paid in the previous 2 years. So we had to pay him for 3 years' time this year, because we were just behind. My predecessor did not make those payments, and he was gracious enough to keep working for our department. in the meantime. Training is a new line item. We didn't have any funding allocated on there. Right now, we set the budget at $10,000 for training. A lot of that right now has been coming out of professional services. So for example, we've had a group of our firefighters take car seat classes, which has been a very beneficial piece for our community and will continue to be over the next few years. And all of those are currently coming out of professional services. Similar expenses next year would come from the training component. Recruitment and retention for firefighters is a new line item. The department hasn't really invested in it in the past. We've allocated, our proposed budget allocates $15,000 for that purpose. Utilities, have you guys heard of the war in Ukraine? Yeah. So we've had a big increase in expenses when it comes to utilities, and we wanted to make sure that we keep track of that as well with the growth. So we're growing that number from 23,000 that's allocated to $30,000. And then the fire department insurance policies, and again, it's modified so that that is the best estimate as to how much that component is for this year. If we had categorized it as is in the 2023 budget, how much it was allocated in 2022. So a similar amount, about $49,000 that we're putting there for fire department insurance policies. Fuel, same thing as with utilities. We wanted to make sure that we have sufficient at peak cost of fuel in the last years. In the last year, we would be just under $24,000 throughout the year. We wanted to make sure that if we continue to see escalating fuel prices, that we're able to meet that need in the budget. Repair and maintenance. This was one of the pieces that we modified. So we allocated, and as I mentioned in the last presentation, obviously, since it hasn't been categorized like this, there's not like a clear cut division, and it hasn't been kept track of in previous years by previous trustees. And so we defined it right now as a 70-30 split between equipment, which would include apparatuses, gear, radios, etc., and the facilities. So everything like our HVAC system, which keeps crapping out occasionally. So it's just part of having a big building that you have to take care of. And then the allowances, we kept it the same amount, given that right now we have sufficient money in the allowances to be able to meet our current volunteer and more, our current volunteer base. So this whole category comes up to about $241,000, $242 if you were to round. All right, so the firefighting budget proposal, just to give you an idea of total. The budget total is 1.2 million. We are bringing in 1.022 million in total revenue. The property tax levy is $960,000. The levy rate is set at 9.48%. Sorry, 9.48 cents per $100 of assessed value. Quick note on that. It is currently being calculated as if we only were able to retain at the end of the day 90% of our certified net assessed value. That is a very conservative estimate. That would assume basically that we lose essentially all of the appeals and maybe even more than that of the property valuations. So that number will likely be closer to 95, 97, but we want to make sure that we have a good enough estimate of that. So miscellaneous revenues. Miscellaneous revenues, vehicle excise tax and CVET, which is a commercial vehicle excise tax. Those two account for $54,000. The quick note on this for both the board and members of the public, the vehicle excise tax, the CVET, the financial institution tax, all of those are based on we have a set amount that the unit is going to receive. And then it's basically a ratio of the levies. So if one of them has 2/3 of all of the levy that we are expecting to put in, that one will get 2/3 of the CVET, for example. So Shelby Township, that will be $8,000 for the contract that we have this year. So that's the estimate that we have for next year as well. And then the property tax cap and impact, we're expecting to lose $187 from that property tax levy as a result of property tax cap. There's always some amount that comes in with the property tax cap. We're going to be using $210,000 from cash reserves. That's the money that we've put in the past to be able to fund the firefighters. And spoiler alert, we didn't have firefighters last year, so we have a lot of money in the bank. We want to be able to make it possible for our taxpayers to see a step in the rate as we continue to grow our department. So the total funding for the department, including those cash reserves, is just $187 shy of the budget. Just so that you guys see. Maximum funding level. So just to give you guys an idea, our maximum levy is 1.9 million. Highest possible budget amount for 2023. Including those cash reserves that are left over, would be 2.28 million. This is our tax rate, 9.48 cents. This would go down if we have more than 90% of the certified net assessed value get, if we get 95% of what the county told us, then the rate would go down. That's making it right. So it'll be most likely just a smidge under that at the end of the day once the LGF includes everything. Just a quick note, the proposed budget rate is lower than Randolph Townships, which is Romney Fire Department, and they carry out how many runs a year? About 200. Yes. So taxpayers here are paying lower rate than Randolph Townships, which is 200 runs. Obviously, that's per capita. Right? That's just to get an idea. Yes. This is how much of the maximum levy we're allocating in this budget, just over 50%. And just for comparison, because of the volunteer component of our department and the process that we're doing, facing it in, this firefighting levy would be an equivalent of about 25% of West Lafayette's firefighting levy. That when you take into account all the CVET and excise tax that West Lafayette would also have. So you're still talking about paying only a quarter of what West Lafayette's residents pay for the fire protection. And this is the amount now allocated, which is just shy of the amount allocated for 2022 in this proposed budget. Continued growth, next steps, just to keep an eye on next year's as well. We're still hoping to go to a staffing level of 12 firefighters, 4 per shift. That'd be chief and a fire chief. And as we've mentioned in the past, our interest is in growing to 50 volunteers by 2020. Right now, we are about 25 active, somewhat active volunteers, and then it's a range of how active they are with the department. Cumulative Fire Fund. Now these are shorter. Cumulative Fire Fund. This one's a little bit different. So Cum Fire is not a fund that is levy limited. It is rate limited. So the maximum levy rate for the fund is set as last year's levy rate. So right now, last year we had 3.33 cents. So we cannot increase that without reestablishing the fund. What that means, for example, is if we were to lower it to 3 cents instead of 3.33 cents, it would be permanently lowered unless we reestablish the fund. So next year we couldn't go above 3. So what this does, and so that is a precursor just to explain that these numbers are going to be a little different in the end, because these numbers that I'm providing here about how much we'll raise is assuming that we only get 90% of the CNAP. Okay. Which in reality, if we get a higher percent of the CNAP, then we're going to be expecting that we'll actually be bringing in more amounts of levy. Okay. Because we're setting the rate at that amount. The total revenue that it would bring under that situation is $358,000, which includes the $21,000 for miscellaneous revenue. Okay. Fire debt fund. This is a fund that's primarily an autopilot. The firefighting, I should have changed that to fire debt funds. I apologize. The fire debt fund is $112,000. That is literally the amount so that we can make the payments on engine 602 in the next year. The total revenue is the property tax levy. Again, this has already been set from the outset by the LGF as to how much we will need to be able to make those payments. And so if we're gonna be collecting a little less than our budget, but we have the money that they've already provided in advance for us to be able to make those payments. Anyway, so I know that this was a big thing there, so I'll take a break for questions from the board regarding fire funds.
So I know we're trying to swap a truck, right? Are we doing that straight cash so that we're not messing with the debt fund? Or are we planning to adjust the debt fund if we make a purchase of? a-
So we will need to change the debt fund by the end of 2024. Is if my memory serves me right, because that is when the last payment of engine 602 is set. So there's a process, essentially what you do is you swap one debt load for another. So you keep the debt fund, but you change it to, for example, whatever the amount is for the purchase of what our engine will be, it's 606. So when we go out to replace 606, that number will change depending on the cost. Now, we do have money for a down payment because we just sold 605, which all of the firefighters here are happy to have some go. Unfortunately, it was a purchase that just didn't make sense for our department in the past. And so we just sold it and we were able to get $200,000 out of it. We originally bought it for $230,000. So it was I got a pretty good, especially as there has been a chip shortage. There has been a shortage of vehicles that are able to operate. So older vehicles are able to go for a little bit higher than we would have gone in the past. So
The other part of the debt fund is that it's a recommendation, and maybe talking to Bill Jones would be helpful in explaining that, but maintaining that debt fund, moving that debt fund on to another purchase. So that's a very, very common thing for a 5-year turnaround time. So at the time that truck's paid off, you maintain that debt fund, because once the debt fund goes away, it's incredibly difficult to get that debt fund back.
Okay.
And have it reestablished. So if you maintain that debt fund and just adjust it based on what that next need is, it's a 5-year turnaround time basically for fire apparatus for that reason.
And DLGF works with you to establish how much you need to establish that fund for that amount of time based on the interest rates. It's a yearly payment, right? Or like usually for vehicles, it's every 6 months. So you do 2 payments a year and it's set, the interest rate, they already know how much you're gonna have to pay. And so they set that amount and they set what those levies are throughout that process. So.
Okay, so we've sold the one that we don't need. We're planning to buy a new one. 24 is when we're gonna deal with that.
Yes-ish. I mean, the process is long. I mean,
Okay.
it's right now, build times, especially during COVID, build times got up to like 580 days on a fire apparatus from the time that they take yes approval on the bid specs. So it's back down to about 360 or so right now. So the process for us is lengthy anyway, getting through the spec process, getting bids out. I mean, it's a 6-month process. I mean, just getting ready to throw bids out. So.
Okay.
Any other questions around those funds? No, just making sure. Okay. All right.
Can I say something about that?
Yes.
I want to hit on something about the personnel, the number of personnel, and I want to be very careful so my words aren't somehow used against me later, but no matter how the conversation occurs in having career firefighters here and adding career firefighters and maintaining volunteers at the same time, depending upon which side of that somebody wants to stand on, it can look like either way the other side is being short. It can look as if we're trying to add careers to minimize our volunteers or whatever that could look like. And I've said it multiple times in here to this group and the people that matter are hearing it. But the significance of us adding volunteers here is huge as well. We had on this slide that, we would add 50 by 28. Well, we can have that done by next year. We just added 10. So it's just a matter of our ability to not just add those people and put them on, but we have to be able to outfit them with the equipment. We have to be able to train them. We have to make them feasible, or we have to make them usable. So a significant number of the people that we bring on here is new, don't have certifications, don't have training. So that's a multi-month process to get those people prepared to be able to take those calls and to be able to do the work. Us adding career firemen does not does not short our need for volunteers by any means. It doesn't short that side of that process when I know that's something that tries to get used as a weapon often, and it is absolutely not that. But I can tell you without a doubt, again, it depending upon how you want to hear it, it's how you hear it, because we need our volunteers. We need them to help offset that need. This need for this growth right now isn't something that we just now decided, hey, it'd be really good to grow. We're 10 years behind the ball doing this anyway. But I can tell you, and Travis can vouch for it, he was on the last 4 structure fires we had. However, this is this is the part that'll end up biting me in the butt, I promise. The last 4 structure fires we had, of the 4, 3 of them, we had 2 to 3 volunteers that turned out for those fires. No fault of theirs. They had lives. They had things going on. They had family commitments. They got to work the next morning. You know, the fire we had a fire on North River Road a week and a half ago. I came from home at 3 o'clock in the morning, and it was Travis and one other guy in the truck, and then Jim showed up. So 2 volunteers showed up to that fire. If West Lafayette Fire Department had not been on the butt of that engine pulling up there, we would have lost that house without a doubt. So again, it's not an us versus them, and no matter how much it's trying to be pitted that way, it's absolutely not that. It is us trying to offset one another. It's us trying to benefit one another and work with one another to make it happen. The only place that fight begins is outside these doors, because when we're all here together, we work well together. When the bell goes off, we all jump on the truck together and we do the job. So no matter how it can be painted, understand that this is a need that we all know that we have. All of us collectively, the volunteers, as much as there may be conversation about that, the volunteers need that break as much as we need them to have that break. This medical call that we just went on, you heard me say that it was a cardiac arrest. 3 minutes from the time that call went out till we were on the scene. The first volunteer arrived 5 minutes after the call went out. 2 minutes when somebody isn't breathing on the floor is significant. And if we don't want to say that it is, go talk to the family right now and we'll have that conversation. I don't mean to be short about it. I don't mean to be a jerk about it, but it continues, no matter how the conversation occurs, it continues to be painted in a way with an us versus them sort of thing. We have to work together. Without them, we don't exist. Without us, they struggle. I'm not going to say they don't exist. They'll make it work. Look at the last year and a half of drama that happened here. They found a way to make it work, and you can't commend them enough for that. But the reality is that we are getting way too busy for the work that we've got going on. Could we kick the can down the road and make this let's hire 2 this year? We'll continue to hire 2? Absolutely we can, but understand that as we're doing that, our run load continues to increase the exact same way. So we're not getting any farther ahead by doing that. This should have happened 10 years ago. And it just didn't. So I don't mean to be frustrated about it. I don't mean to come across that way. I think that as we continue to grow, no matter how this would have occurred, somebody's the bad guy. Just the way it has to work, right? And no one wants to see a tax increase. Nobody does. The reality is that I can look at it as a tax increase that sucks and it's hard for everybody. Or I can look at it as if it's offsetting when Travis going home, when he's the only paid firefighter here, and it takes minutes for somebody else to get there with him. We have to protect our own people, or they can't protect the people outside of this building. I'm not saying volunteers aren't doing that. Just a time delay, right? Just a simple time delay of getting out of your bed and getting to this building to get the equipment to go is significant. We can peel apart NFPA 1710 and 1720. We can peel those apart all day long, and I'll give you as much data as you want on it. The reality of it is, it's not just the number of people that's a recommendation through there, it's response times as well. We're not anywhere close to that with our volunteers responding on their own. We have to offset one another and benefit one another, or we're all going to fail.
And I'll add a thing here and correct me if I'm mistaken, but 1710 also states, for example, how many firefighters you would need to respond to, for example, a single unit fire, how many would need to respond to an apartment fire, all of these. And the lowest of those is 8, just so that we're clear as to how much staffing we need. The lowest of all of those numbers is 8. And what it essentially tells you, if you read 1710 and the documents and the flyers that IFPA also produces to summarize those pieces, are 1710 tells you that the engine shows up on scene, is able to analyze the scene, and then is able to start making decisions as to how to operate on scene while more personnel arrives. They're the ones that carry the truck to the scene and begin operating, but they can't do it, which is 4 guys. So there is no version of this budget that doesn't require us to continue to invest in our volunteers and to continue to grow the number of volunteers in our department.
It's important to remember that NFPA 1710 is a recommendation. Could we say that's not something we want to reach for because it's too far out of our reach? Absolutely, we could do that. We could absolutely say, hey, we don't want to stretch. We don't want to do anything more than what we're doing right now because that really hurts and it's hard. It absolutely is. But if we don't set a standard someplace, we will forever be stuck where we're at.
And just a note on that too, I think it's not a surprise to a lot of folks. West Lafayette is landlocked, right? West Lafayette is landlocked, and it means that a lot of our population increase in similar suburban settings as West Lafayette is coming in from folks that might have considered living in West Lafayette. There's just no housing available. The expectation of what they need to see from a fire department does not change because they are across from that line. And so we need to make sure that between our combination of departments, between the paid guys and the volunteers that we're looking to invest in, that we can provide quality fire protection for them. So, yep.
And do we know, does West Lafayette operate on those standards?
They try. They tried just the exact same. Do they meet 1710? I think a lot of departments in the country struggle to meet it. But it's just like the other rock that keeps getting thrown on ISO. Those aren't requirements that you meet those things. We are not an NFPA state. So some states like New York, there are states that are required to meet NFPA rules. We're not an NFPA state. But again, unfortunately, not being an NFPA state allows you to have departments that function completely different, operating in very close proximity to one another with different staffing levels, different equipment types, all sorts of things. Those we have to find in anything you do, fire service, whatever it be, there's a gold standard to that job.
Yeah.
We have to try to work towards it. The beauty of NFPA is, and that's not being an NFPA state, is you got the ability to go, I mean, that's way out of your reach. So, you know, there's 1720 as well. 1710 is a career heavy combination department. It's not just a career department thing, and you guys will hear some folks tell you that it is not. It's based on population. It's based on other things, but there's also 1720 that applies to volunteer departments and non-heavily populated areas. Those requirements are a lot more lax, but those requirements, we would struggle to meet those today.
Yeah. So that was where I was going was like, let's say you need 6 people on a scene to operate the truck. Today, you're relying on 5 volunteers to do that because you've got 1 guy on shift going out, which is 20% of your volunteers that you need on every fire. Yeah, which seems
If available.
if
available.
and which is it seems completely unrealistic.
So it is unrealistic. So put yourself in a spot where when this room is full of firefighters heading in here, you've got to come in and be like, hey, listen, I understand that you've all got life and you've all got things to do. And I want to be very cognizant of that and careful. I try very, very hard to do that, but at the same time, the citizen outside here doesn't care. There's still a need. When they call it the worst day of their life.
Yeah.
And we have an expectation to provide a service out here. Good, bad, right, wrong. And I'm sorry that for those of you that don't know me, I'm not a feeling sort of guy when it comes to this job. Feelings can't tie into it. We have a job to do. It's black and white, and we have to go do it. And we can make it feelings, and we can say that we don't want to hurt people's feelings by not having the same expectation. But you guys have heard me say before that my volunteers, I feel like my volunteers that go out of here in a truck should be trained to the same level as my career firemen that go out of here. Period. Their training level should be the same. Should my expectation of their time here be the same? Absolutely not. I'm paying people to be here. But the volunteers, that's still part of that job. And what I don't want to do is lower our standards of what we will bring in here and what we will push out of here on a fire truck just to get more people in the door. I would rather have 10 that want to be here and do the job right than 30 that don't really care. There's just too much work to do on those folks. So, and the job we do when we walk out of here is way too serious for that. Sorry, I can do this all night long.
One last piece on that really is at the end of the day, you know, you've heard us highlight this. I think I haven't used this analogy since Tyson was here, screwing a lot of stuff over.
A lot of things with you here we don't want to say.
Yeah, but our fire department has increased tenfold the number of runs in the last 30 years or so. And we still have the same number of of volunteers. So, you're essentially asking the volunteer to show up 10 times as often. That's what you're saying. And 10 times as often just isn't realistic. It's still a volunteer. If it were the full-time job, they would be on a department, if they're a volunteer.
So let me add a nail in the coffin here, so we don't drag this out until morning. Anytime that truck rolls out as a resident of this township, I expect a professional firefighter. And we've always gotten that. And to expect anything less, I think, is hazardous, not only to our health, but to those men and women who roll out on that piece of equipment. So I don't know if we've ever said that public in the meeting, but we always expect a professional firefighter to show up. We had a house fire near us a while back, and you'd have thought that it was a professional New York fire department showing up by the way they handled, and they saved the house. And it was these guys and a bunch of volunteers. So you're right. We expect professional training, professional equipment all the time.
I think the other half of that is that it's important. You use the word professional, and that's a word that's often misconstrued in this job. Professional is a lot of times looked at as somebody that receives a paycheck. I've worked with volunteer firefighters that are more professional than some of the people this job puts food on their table. It's a matter of commitment. It's about doing the job for the right reason and with your heart in the right place. And that's the hard part for what we do, is finding that person. And I think that we say it about a lot of things in our life, right? You get what you pay for. We're going to get what we pay for if we don't start working today to facilitate the growth that is coming with being able to see it.
And last nail on the coffin for me, I would be failing my constituents if I didn't put the budget with at least 3 firefighters. Given the growth that we have. And anybody that does, anybody in the past that didn't do that, I think that they failed on that particular regard. So, it's a compounding failure, and that's why we're doing now what we should have done 2 years ago, because we're done failing. General fund. Personnel services, it's the elected officials and the township administrator salaries and benefits. We added an intern line item, and then we're covers FICA as well. You see here the pay of the township board, 9,000. Now don't get too excited. It's only 3,000 for you. Just really silly. And then the township admin component, again, a 4% increase. Right now, the 2022 amount essentially says that we're paying 25 hours of time for the township admin. Frankly speaking, our township administrator puts in more heart and hours than those 25 hours. And we have work for 40 hours. That's why we're expanding to 40 hours next year. So, the salary of the trustee, a small bump up, well, a bump up to 40. It's not a small bump up. I recognize that, but I think that the job requires a full-time trustee here, given how much we're planning on growing, how much opportunities for community outreach and processes that you guys will continue to hear more about. There's grant opportunity that we're exploring, more work when it comes to medical services that between the department and the township. We can work with partners. I mentioned custom less pharmacy. That's some of what that looks like, I think. This job requires 5 hours if you do the bare minimum, but we're not here to do the bare minimum. Intern stipends, we created a line item for $5,000 for intern stipends. So, and I don't have that distribution here, but in the last PowerPoint that I presented, I highlighted how many hours over the summer and over the spring and fall that represents for. And it's not like it's a super high paid position. We're talking about $10 an hour at this point in time. But our target audience would be like Purdue students or Ivy Tech students that are interested in going to public policy. It's an opportunity for us to be able to receive some extra help, but also to prepare the next generation of leaders in our communities. Health insurance, it got zeroed out last year. Obviously, that doesn't reflect actual expenditures. So we're talking $18,000 between myself, and then this part's important. It accounts for the entirety of the township administrators' healthcare coming out of the general fund. We're not taking any piece of the township admin's healthcare from the 1111 fund. Civilian perf, we're looking to increase that because we want to include the township administrator in that perf plan, okay? So that'll be a slightly different, beast, if you will. And because they'll be a full-time employee, so we're essentially providing retirement benefits for the township administrator. Then the FICA, and we had actually over the last line item in 2022 is actually higher than what you would need for FICA. So we just reduced it to the amount that it would take for the township admin, the township trustee, and the help, and the interns to be able to pay the FICA component. Okay. And then unemployment, last year we hadn't put any amounts into it, and so we put $150 in it. As you guys know, sometimes you pay unemployment, sometimes not. It depends on if the person's been long enough and you're in the job, their unemployment account might already be currently at maxed out. So right now, for most of our staff, we're not paying any unemployment, but we have to plan for us to have to pay for unemployment for everybody because we don't offset. And it's a small number, obviously, so it's not like it's a preposterous thing. So that, and actually that is an addition that wasn't in the last one. So that's $150 difference from the last meeting for this one.
Trustee,
Yes.
on that note, I'm really happy to see the number in there for the intern.
Yes.
I think that's excellent. That's an idea that Michelle Whiterock and I had discussed a couple of years back now, and I know we had discussed that back when you were on the board.
Yes.
To that end, I wouldn't mind seeing that referred to as the Whiterock Fellow. I'll throw that out there.
That
In
is
jest,
a
but also
fantastic
very
idea.
serious.
To refer to like name the program the Woodrock Fellowship. I think that is a good honor for a board member that really put a lot of heart in that for our township.
And exposing fraud.
Yes. And on that note, same thing, part of what we did for this, I think that the job of an elected official is to also go out and talk to people with expertise and experience, and you don't always know every answer. You have to be able to work with other folks and be able to establish good relationships with your department, with community partners, etc. And so Michelle has gone back to help us
No, not necessarily.
craft what that will look like. So between Amy, Michelle, and I,
Name after
we
Michelle.
crafted it.
Okay.
So for supplies, we have office supplies and postage. We did a small decrease in office supplies, budgeted for a variety of reasons. I mean, we simply aren't expending that much out of it. A thing that you'll notice in the township assistance fund in the past, there have been, and the sum has been set at 300 for quite a few years. We said that $300 of office supplies was coming from the township assistance. Now, as we mentioned before, the township assistance and the general fund share a maximum levy. So that separation is more academic than anything between those two. And it just doesn't make sense. It's not like we go around separating, well, this much paper that we bought is for township assistance purposes, and this is for the general operation of the office. It just is not how we operate. So we moved it all to here, and we changed it to an amount that's more reasonable. So it's a small decrease because we just don't spend that much money. On the other hand, however, for postage, the cost of the stamp increased. So based on our current rate of going to stamps, we bumped it up to 300, which is about 600 stamps if I was to correct it. For record, because I think it's $60 per $100 roll right now. So that was a very complicated subcategory, as you can tell. Services and charges, line items. So this covers a couple of different pieces, grounds maintenance, professional services, bonds, and also the phone bill. Phone bill is the only thing that we pay out of utilities for general fund. So that's listed on there. So for professional services, we didn't really have a line item. We had it all under consult legal. So we separated the piece of that to 4,000. Consult legal, barring us going to war with our department, we don't really need legal counsel particularly often. We do want to make sure that we have funding available there. We do use consult, the consult part, we use, Bill Jones at this moment as our consultant when it comes to financial matter, so we have that, but we have decreased it. This is just not realistic that we need 15,000. And for the record, 15,000 was a decrease, as you guys remember, because we decreased it when we did the budget last week. Publication, we left it at about the same amount. This is, it's a sufficient amount. Insurance, and you'll see a decrease in that. We haven't really been expending the insurance line item from the department, from the general fund. In part because a lot of, for example, the building insurance and everything is taken care of by the department. The space that the township offices occupy is a minuscule amount of the entire amount. And so we paid that historically from the firefighting fund. And it doesn't really make sense for us to try to separate that into two different bills. So we did also see a separate change in that. We are now covered under the umbrella of the fire department as a municipality. Part of this is because last year, after all of the drama with my predecessor, we were deemed uninsurable by many of the insurance companies out there, just because of the history of all the issues in the office. Now, the silver lining to that is that we could have done that a few years ago and saved the township money without really increasing our rates on insurance, but previous trustees have always kept it separate. Now we don't have the option, and it's also saved the taxpayer dollars, so it's fine. Official bonds, it's essentially the bonds for Amy and myself. So Amy being the township administrator. So, we're bonded for a certain amount, and the company, ensures that, a certain amount of dollars. And in the event that an elected official were to commit fraud or anything like that, which certainly has never happened in our township's history or in our county's history. It's not like we're doing that twice. Utilities, we have, basically decreased it to $800. We weren't using the amount there. And as I mentioned, the $800 basically covers just the phone bills for our side of the building. So I believe that would be for 3 phones. Right now we have 2, but with the addition of an intern, it would be a person that can make phone calls and start to take a lot of the intake forms and everything from the township assistance piece and other pieces. So we would add a 3rd line there, and that would be covered under it.
We pay all of those other bills, but I can't even pay the phone bill for all of them. It's cool though.
It's fine, yeah. ITA dues and expenses. This is a slightly changed line. We changed the name of the line item. In ITA dues and expenses, there was like a duplicate line. You can see there that there was ITA dues, and then the next one was dues and subscription, and they were both set at 1020, which honestly sounded like a mistake in a previous budget that the line item didn't get changed or removed. We don't really have any other dues and subscriptions other than ITA theoretically. So what we did, the maximum amount that ITA dues could be for next year is $750. $750. We reached out to ITA. We haven't received yet an amount estimate of how much that would be. So we did put on there the similar expenses, and that to end of that category would be that it would be like educational expenses too. So like, for example, if there were conference in Indianapolis, for example, that board members need to attend and whatnot, it would be able to cover some of the cost of travel, et cetera. So that's the purpose of that line item, and that's why it's larger than just the ITA dues. Ground maintenance. What we did, we separated grounds maintenance into 2 different pieces. Historically, it's been just one. So I left the one amount there, the 27,000. What we did, we want to make sure that we separated it into 2 different pieces. And part of it is because we want to make sure that we are also helping out our the people that we contract out to. So we separated out by labor and supplies. When we pay them for the supplies separately, they don't get taxed 15% on it. So we're trying to also be, kinder to the small businesses that we work with by trying to separate out the supply piece that we're able to pay them for, and then a labor part, which is the part that they get taxed out, the 15% if they're self-employed. And then that adds up to about 52,800.
So just a quick question, so. We know that there was some concern about some of the trees at Sandridge. Is that part of this, is he charging this for putting that up, right, and that goes into that,
Yes, into labor, yeah.
okay?
And so grounds maintenance, I'll also I'll stop there just to give a bigger overview. There's historically been basically three main pieces that goes into grounds maintenance. One of them has been mowing. Mowing has changed in that this year, as we've mentioned in previous meetings, because the fire department is mowing the two properties that are the station. So this property and then station 2 down on Newman Road. But the cemeteries would be mowed and taken care of out of that fund. Second big expense that we have on labor front is snow removal. We live in Indiana, and some years we might get half an inch of snow that we really have to take care of the plow, or we get battered with a $10,000 bill for snow removal over a long snowstorm like we did this year. So it fluctuates a little bit. I think we're on pace to be able to meet that need in this particular situation. Capital outlays. We changed just a little bit the format, the way that it had been budgeted in the past was a little antiquated, and it didn't include anything for technology replacement or anything like that that's essential for an office. So we're doing capital outlays here. You'll see we did do a decrease in cemetery infrastructure. That is based in part because there's a limit to what types of things we can do on cemetery infrastructure. So we found out that, for example, a thing that we hoped in the past we could have done out of that fund, which was maintenance of headstones, cannot be taken care of in this fund. So we would need to see donations and other pieces. So we don't expect that the expenses will be that high in future years if we can't use it for that purpose, which is probably the more expensive one that we would have had. That same,
So would that include fencing and so on?
yes, and I was gonna get to that. On that note, I know I've updated you in the past. We are in the process still with the Indiana Department of Transportation, trying to get that fence over here fixed on the cemetery near Menards. An issue that we have is that there's no serious plat. And we have to survey the area. The county surveyor said they no longer provide those services, which is a little weird since they're the surveyor. But
They-
yeah, but we're gonna have to survey that property so that we can make sure that where the lines are, where the right of way is and all of that. And then so we're in the process of doing that. Obviously, that takes time. It's dealing with state bureaucracy. It doesn't happen overnight.
Again, though, stuff that should have all been done years ago, that should have all been plotted out, that should have all been, there should have already been all of that legwork already done. So now it's getting caught up. I mean, he could easily go and just pay for new fence to put out there, but it's not fixing anything long-term for any of that stuff.
So where will we pay for the surveying? Because that's not an inexpensive service. So from which category do you plan to pay for that? And then also, have we talked with any of our local surveyors? I know.
Amy has been in the process of reaching out to surveyors. Yeah. I think that, and I will say that this came after when we did the initial, when we uploaded the budget onto Gateway, so we weren't expecting this huge expense this year. But generally speaking, something like that would probably have professional services,
Yeah.
which is obviously it's a challenge. Now, one thing that I would encourage us to consider for future budgets, and even like as you guys know, we can keep the same amounts, or we can do changes in next year to make sure that the budget properly reflects what we're going to be expending. But I would suggest that we look into seeing if we need to create a separate line item specifically for cemetery related professional services. I don't think that we will. I think that this is a very much a one-off that we shouldn't have, but we're planning on doing naturally is surveying all of our cemeteries at once so that we get it all done. This is a trend that we're seeing. For example, we are in the process of dropping off stuff for the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, the VMV, because my predecessors, and actually not Tyson, my predecessors didn't title a lot of the vehicles. And so when we went to sell 605, we didn't have a title for the vehicle. And so we went to the.
I remember having lost that on a previous truck or two.
Oh, yeah,
I
yes.
remember this issue.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So it's been an interesting time, and so we're in the process of.
I can.
I'm sorry, I have to ask a question.
Yeah,
How in the hell do you plate a vehicle without a title?
State of Indiana doesn't require, if there is water in a truck, if it's a fire truck, it's not required to have a license plate on it. So, and municipal plates are different. Municipal plates, at least law enforcement agencies allow municipal plates to float from vehicle to vehicle. So, the license plate that's on the fire truck out here doesn't necessarily return to that individual vehicle, just to our department. So, and we're finding out that it's actually a pretty standard practice in municipalities to just hold certificates of origin, not title. That doesn't work for me. So,
no,
it's up. We're
it
trying
doesn't,
to.
and as you can imagine by my mentioning it, it also doesn't work for me. So we're in the process of titling that, and so you're going to see when you guys do the general, the annual report next year, you're gonna see some, not like huge expenses, but odd expenses on BMV. We've had to pay we're gonna end up having to pay like $200-300 on late fees for not titling the vehicle on time, because the municipalities don't title it and then they pay the late fees. And that's, even if it's $300, it's insanely stupid. I mean, it's our taxpayers' dollars and we're literally wasting time, and then when we have to do something, it's just over.
I mean, the last truck was in 1992 that we sold, that we had to go file for lost or stolen title for it. So we actually get the title completely, so that was in 19.
Yeah.
So,
And that's an additional expense because filing for a lost or stolen title is $125 plus.
And so, to finish there, technology replacement is a new line item. We put 2140, that is based on essentially, a replacement period for the laptops of about 5 years, just assuming that the laptops in general will need to be replaced every 5 years. Now, I do want to make a caveat here. We bought the laptops for the staff. However, we did not buy a laptop for the trustee either. So that in there includes the possibility for a future trustee to buy a laptop if we're necessary. Now, my laptop's devices, so I don't really, but it's an expensive.
So on technology, do we own or do we lease all the copying equipment and everything else?
So it is different for each one. For example, we had one here that was past needing to get thrown out. It was literally held together by tape. And so we had one over here, which the lease was coming to an end. And so what we did was that it was of a similar size and it was a bigger printer that fits the need of a bigger office, like so like the department, which has more folks printing and all of that, and bigger manuals and all that. So we bought out the lease for that machine and we put it here, and we're leasing a smaller machine for over there. Exactly. Or a more manageable one, less expensive. We don't need a huge one. Office furnishing, again, it was modified. I think in the last one it was called land, or land capital expenses. And we're just saying $2,500 if, like, over time you need to replace, like a bed, sorry, a desk or stuff like that. It's a normal expense, or even the carpet underneath my floor. I don't plan to replace it, but probably within 5 years we'll need to. It's coming apart at the seams and all of that, and that's just normal in an office setting. So general fund budget proposal, it's $188,000. The property tax levy is $39,527. That shares a maximum levy with the township assistance, so that's about $69,000, the total levy for that one. Miscellaneous revenue, the largest one is local income tax shares, that's $153,000. FDOA has stated that all local income tax shares need to be placed into the general fund. They used to be that the townships were allowed to decide what fund to put them in, but the FDOA's guidance is that they must be placed there. So all of it goes here. Excise tax is a small piece, 2,000, and then we have a property tax cap impact, and the number is really large, but that's because we lose money from West Lafayette because they have a lot of TIF districts, and they're already capped out for most of their income, right? So when it comes to property taxes, they're already capped out, so we might lose some of that money, and so that's the amount for this fund. So the total funding is 192. We're actually expecting a little more funding than the budget actually is. Township assistance fund, this one comes with a caveat here. So the framework actually looks higher than what you saw last year. There's that what you saw last week. I want to explain what's going on here, just to give you a detail. The only change was this number used to be 15,000 in my last presentation. It's now 35. What we did on the advice of our financial consultant was we are going to do a budget reduction for the year 2022 because we're not expecting to spend all of the funding that we have allocated in the budget for township assistance. Right now, as we mentioned, we're about $60,000 of township assistance. And so we're doing a $20,000 reduction, which will bring our budget for 22 to 29,700. And we'll be able to allocate that funding into the 2023 without, needing to raise more revenues. So that'll be $35,000 for housing, utility $7,500, prescriptions $5,000. Quick note here, part of what we're trying to do with this fund also is start the process of insulin and other pieces. Funeral and burials, it'll be 5,000, and then other direct relief 2,500. And so the total amount is 55. Obviously, last year we only had it 2 categories, even though we have to use the other ones sometimes as well. One quick note on this, just for your guys' brains and for anybody that's consider running for a board and might be on a board next year. With the proposed increase in property taxes to be able to increase the staffing level of the department, side effect of that will be that our local income tax shares will actually increase. So we'll be able to fund a lot more of the general fund without actually touching the shared levy, maximum levy for both of them. So we're actually expecting that in the coming years, we'll be able to allocate more funding for township assistance. So that is actually a very interesting side benefit. And it's part of the reason why we're beginning to have conversation with community partners about how we can have better.
And you're gonna see more of that with all these homes coming in eventually.
Yep. So township assistance, the total revenue is 29,000. We are gonna have a property tax levy of 30,000. And we're gonna get miscellaneous revenues of 1,779. But because again, the property tax cap impact from West Lafayette, you're actually gonna see a reduction in revenue of $2,300. So, and based on the fund on the reduction that will make money available for next year, that's another $20,000. So the total funding for it will be 49,449. That is still under the total budget. As you guys know, over the last 2 years, we didn't provide really township assistance, so we have a lot of money in cap reserve. So we're not really worried about drawing down that fund significantly. We have the money to be able to spend it if we actually reach the $55,000 in expenses.
How much is in cash reserve?
I don't have it off the top of my head, but if you give me a few minutes, while we ask questions, I can pull that up.
Okay.
Rainy day fund, a similar thing to the reduction that you saw in township assistance. Bill, our financial advisor, recommended, where we are in our budget, we're not going to really touch rainy day fund this year. So we're going to do a reduction of $21,000, and reductions need to be authorized by the board similarly to additional appropriations. A reduction of $21,000, and that reduction will then use all the funding for next year. And we weren't going to, you can't raise the levy anyway for rainy day in any case, but we're just going to keep using the same amount and having it available in case of a need. So. Property tax rates, this is a summary here, and we're getting to the end, I promise. This is all of the property tax rates. Again, the note that I told you guys earlier, that rate is probably going to be, the rate that's written here is higher than the final rate will most likely be in 99% of instances, because we're going to be able to receive a higher percentage of our certified net assessed value, so not 90%. This assumes that it's 90%. And so for the unincorporated township, the tax rate is 14.26 cents per $100 of the assessed value, of net assessed value. And as you see that for the township, for the West Lafayette component, it's a very small part. Obviously, as has always been the case, the vast majority of our funding from levies comes into fire-related funds, which West Lafayette doesn't pay because they have their own fire protection. So for West Lafayette residents, it's 0.030 cents. That's actually a tiny decrease from last year because of the way that the growth is below the incomes and assessed values. So impact to median taxpayer in an unincorporated township. I wanted to present a few scenarios to you guys, just to give you guys an idea as to what the impact is on a taxpayer. And we're comparing it to the 2021 budget. The reason why, because we saw last year, as you guys are aware, when we did the funding, my predecessor didn't really provide funding for us to even have staff, so that's why we're burning some cash reserves this year. And we're gonna use some of those cash reserves for next year to step in, phase in the increase for taxpayers. So in 2021, total township property tax rate, by that I mean the unincorporated area, was 11.63 cents. In 23, so that we can support 9 firefighters, 3 per shift. Instead of 3, we're talking 14.26 cents. That represents a 22.60% increase, which is not an insignificant amount. As we mentioned, we recognize that it does impact the taxpayers. But these are examples of the taxpayers, and I'll say, for example, the lower end here for gross assessed value, like I pulled numbers from some of our staff just to check what that looks like. For example, Sherry Hertz is a little bit under that amount for how much it is. You're a little bit under that amount. I think I shared that with you. And then, so let's say that they have a homestead deduction that comes with a standard supplemental deduction. The average taxpayer has a mortgage. That's a standard deduction of $3,000. At this time, it's phasing away in 25. Net assessed value, even though it's $250,000, the net assessed value would be $130,000. Their 2021 township property tax for this at cost of a gross assessed value would have been $151. And so that means that their township property tax bill for this year is $185. It's a yearly increase of $34 with $2.85 a month. For a homeowner that's $300,000 gross assessed value, same thing, you go through it. It's, goes from 189 to 232 from 21 to 23. You have a $42 increase, $43 increase, $3.56 a month. For a homeowner that has a house at about $320,000 gross assessed value, which is actually pretty standard for a lot of community, that would be $45,000 in the homestead deduction, $96,000 from the standard supplemental deduction. The mortgage deduction would be $3,000. Net assessed value comes out to $176,000. Receipts from $204 to $250, $46, $385 a month. Homeowner, a homeowner, and I wanted to make sure to include folks that may have farmland. Let's assume that you have a $230,000 gross assessed value household with farmland of about $75,000 worth of farmland. You're talking a homestead deduction of $45,000, a supplemental deduction of $64,000, and those are on the house because you don't have deductions in farmland. And the net assessed value is $192,000, and you go from a tax bill of about $223 to $274. That's a monthly increase of $4.2 a month. I do want to mention that there are a couple of things that are not accounted into this. Usually the amount will actually be a little lower that you have to pay. There's other deductions, like for example, veterans have a deduction that goes into that. There's deductions that there are other smaller deductions that are a little bit harder to calculate that get done by the assessor's office. So we kept it at ignoring a lot of deductions that would actually decrease your impact on your tax bill. So we're giving you a high water estimate of how much that is. Any questions from the board? Overall, I know that it's a long presentation, but budget's a long thing.
Nothing I haven't already.
No, I looked at it before.
Any questions, Heather? All right.
So this really comes in consult with Bill.
Yes, Bill helped me input. Help me input all of this onto a gateway as well. So let me open this here. They said there are anybody here that needs to ask a question and wants to ask a question. Any questions from the floor or from folks on the Zoom? Or comments, I guess? I'll give an opportunity for folks. Well, in that case, the next piece of it would be Mr. Pitlar's would consider a motion to close here. So,
Yeah, so moved.
all right. And yeah, you can cover the future meetings.
Yes. All right, so relevant to this, the budget adoption will be October 4th, so not our regular meeting time, to be noted. And then we will do a open house with a speaker from the APC during our normal meeting time on October 18th, that's the third Tuesday. So we'll have an extra meeting next month, for the budget adoption. So just FYI, in case you want to be there. Does anybody have any announcements that they want to make before we wrap up? All right. Hearing that, I will move to adjourn.
Second that.
Second.
All right.